The needle was already in my arm when he walked through the door. I did not scream. I did not resist. Graced servants do not do either of those things. We learn early that resistance is not something we are permitted, and I had been graced for 11 years. 11 years of dimming my markings when nobles walked past. 11 years of making myself smaller, quieter, less. The medical technician had the look of a man completing a routine task, because to him, that is exactly what this was. Then the door opened. He said, calmly and without raising his voice, "Take that out of her arm." The technician turned. I turned. Standing in the doorway of the medical wing of the estate ship Calith was a human male, 30-something, covered in grease from the atmospheric vents he had spent the last 3 days repairing without authorization. His name was Owen Garrett. He was a contracted engineer from a small human firm nobody in the Concord had heard of, and he had no business being in this room. He walked in anyway. "Sir, this is a restricted procedure," the technician said. "I know what it is," Owen said. "And I know what it does. Remove the needle." My markings, which I had trained to gray over a decade, flickered gold. I crushed them back to nothing. I told him quietly that this was not his concern. I told him Lord Calith had authorized it. I told him the paperwork was in order. I told him all the things I had been telling myself since the summons arrived, because if I said them out loud, they felt less like surrender. He looked at me for a moment. Then he sat down in the chair beside the medical bed, crossed his arms, and said, "Then we'll wait here until the lawyers arrive." I stared at him. "What lawyers?" "The ones I messaged 20 minutes ago from the maintenance corridor. They're fast. Humans usually are when somebody's doing something that makes a good case." He tilted his head toward the technician. "You can stay too. Won't take long." The needle came out. Not because of law, not yet, because the technician was not certain enough to continue. And uncertainty is a more powerful thing than most people realize. I had met Owen Garrett 4 days earlier. He arrived to repair the atmospheric core that Lord Calith had let deteriorate for 6 months, because a real repair meant a residential shutdown, and shutdown meant lost face before the delegation of House Vorn. Lord Calith had ordered a cosmetic patch and a clean report. Owen looked at the damage readings and said, very politely, "No. They sent me to manage him. That is what I do. I read the emotional state of a room and smooth it. I make friction disappear. I was told to use my empathic abilities to calm the human and guide him toward compliance." I went. I sat across from him at the workbench. I prepared to do what I always do. He offered me food first. Not because it was protocol. Not because he was performing generosity. He said, "You look like you've been on your feet since morning. I've got 2 of these." He slid a sealed packet across the bench without looking up from the schematic. "Take it or don't." I took it. I did not know why. 11 years of careful, trained distance, and one human with greasy hands and zero social awareness broke it by sharing a meal packet. Then he asked me what I actually thought about the repair. I told him the truth. The ship would vent lethally within 2 weeks if left unaddressed. The residential wing housed 26 servants. There were emergency pods for the noble-class passengers. There were none for the servants. Lord Calith's people knew. They had calculated the risk against the political inconvenience and made their choice. Owen was quiet for a long time. He said, 26 people. I said yes. He said, "And they just decided that?" I said yes. I told him it was not unusual. I told him the calculus of the Concord is old and settled, and the weight assigned to each life is determined long before any crisis. I told him this with the flat voice of someone who has accepted the world as it is. He picked up his tools and said, "Right, different plan." He began the repair that night. He filed the paperwork simultaneously, layering requests and counter-requests until the legal question of whether he was authorized would take longer to answer than the repair itself would take to complete. I knew where every supply cache on the ship was located. He asked me to help. I helped. During those 3 nights, something happened that I do not have clean language for. We talked. Not the careful, bounded conversation of a servant managing a guest. Real talking. He asked about my markings, not with the collector's curiosity I was used to from nobles, the kind that made me feel like a painting being appraised. He asked because he wanted to know what the gold meant versus the gray, and whether I had a preference. I told him gold was contentment, closeness, warmth. He nodded. He said, "Okay, good to know." He did not make anything out of it. He just went back to the vent coupling. But I noticed, without meaning to, that my markings had been gold for the past hour. When Lord Calith discovered the unauthorized repair, his response was swift. Owen's contract was voided. His firm was flagged for Concord blacklisting, and I was summoned for recalibration, which is what nobles call the procedure that dampens a Velhari's empathic sensitivity. It makes us more compliant. It makes us easier. It is legal because we are graced, and graced means useful enough to keep but not enough to protect. I had spent 11 years knowing this was possible and choosing not to look at it directly. I reported to the medical wing. I sat on the bed. I let them prepare the needle. Then Owen walked in. He stayed in that chair while two human lawyers transmitted documents from a station 3 systems away. Lord Calith arrived personally, which told me he was angrier than he wanted to appear. He demanded to know what authority Owen had. Owen cited a contracted personnel protection clause, a provision humans had built into early Concord trade agreements. He said I had been acting under his direction during the repair, which was accurate and legally significant. Lord Calith said the claim was absurd. Owen produced a second document, a human legal instrument called a household dependency claim. No direct Concord equivalent. It asserted that I was a registered dependent of his household and could not undergo medical alteration without my consent and his. Lord Calith said it would not hold. Owen said, maybe, but it'll take 8 months to find out. Lord Calith looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at me. Owen turned to look at me too. My markings were cycling through colors I had not shown in years, cycling the way they do when a Velhari cannot decide what she is feeling because she is feeling everything at once. He looked at me in that room full of witnesses, with Lord Calith standing 3 feet away, and he said it plainly, and without performance. You're mine to look out for. I know that's not exactly how you say it here, but that's what I'm saying. It was not the Noble Adoption Declaration word for word, but it was close enough that every Velhari in earshot understood it, and different enough that it could not be challenged as a formal claim. It was a human doing what humans apparently do when they find that the rules do not cover what they believe should be covered. They file adjacent paperwork and stand in the gap. My markings went gold. Fully, completely, without my permission, and for the first time in 11 years I did not crush them back. Lord Calith settled. The legal ambiguity was too dangerous to pursue, and the lawyers Owen's firm sent were the kind who seemed to enjoy danger. I was transferred into Owen's registered delegation for the duration of the review period, not into a noble house, not into a higher grade of graced status, into something the Concord had no word for, because humans had invented it themselves and only recently brought it here. At the first Concord function I attended as part of his delegation, the herald asked for names. Owen gave mine. Not my title, not my function, my name. Sael. Just that. One word. Mine. My markings stayed gold for the rest of the evening. Owen handed me a drink and asked if I thought the music was too loud. I told him it was a little loud. He agreed. We stood there being mildly annoyed by the music, which is such a small thing that I spent the walk home trying to understand why it felt like the most significant moment of my life. I think I understand now. Nobles offer graced servants tolerance, use, position, access. What they do not offer is the ordinary, the unremarkable Tuesday, the shared meal packet, the question about whether the music is too loud. Owen read every kind of paperwork he could find, looking for a gap large enough to stand in, because 26 people had no escape pods and one person was about to be hurt for helping him care. He did not do it for credit. He did it because he could not look away. Humans are not the most powerful species in the Concord, not the oldest, not the most feared, but they have this one quality that I have not found in any other species at any level of Concord society. They look at a rule that makes someone less than a person, and they go looking for the exception. They find the gap. They climb through it, and then they reach back. I was told for 11 years that no one would ever claim me. The person who did had simply never received the memo that it was impossible. So he ignored it, filed the paperwork, and sat down in a chair and waited. That is the most human thing I have ever seen, and I am grateful, every ordinary Tuesday, that I was there to see it.